All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. So you have Iranian spies working, or at least that worked inside of the Biden administration. You have rallies, if you could call them that, anti-Semitic rallies across the country and across the globe that are going on, and all of this after literally you had 14 innocent Jews that were murdered on 10/7, some bound, burned alive, shot, beheaded, dismembered, all by Hamas. And yet you have a White House calling for a ceasefire. You have people on the left, even inside of college institutions right here in the United States of America, that are vehemently, in my opinion, anti-Semitic. Where does this stop? Listen, guys, listen, if you're Jewish, I got to tell you, it is time to leave the left. They hate you. And I'm going to be talking about that next. Maybe I'll sway you. Maybe I won't, but I'm going to give it a shot on this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. This is your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, there's a couple of videos that I want to run for you. The first is of Ted Cruz. He appeared on Mark Levin's show this past Sunday, and he talks about some of the Iranian spies that were inside of the Biden White House, one in particular who had aides working for him. Do you think that it is possible that these Iranian spies got themselves or got a hold of some, I don't know, maybe top secret information? Let's hear what Senator Cruz has to say about it. This is him on the Mark Levin program, Life, Liberty, and Levin.
Rob Malley, who was the chief Iran person for the Biden administration, he was the one trying to negotiate yet another appeasement, yet another capitulation in a new Iranian nuclear deal. Rob Malley's been fired. His security clearance has been revoked. We don't know why, but he did something so egregious that even this White House revoked his security clearance. What we do know is that Rob Malley brought in 3 senior advisors, all of whom were Iranian operatives. They were spies. They were recruited by the Iranian government. They're Iranian Americans. They were reporting directly to the foreign minister of Iran. They were taking direction from the foreign minister of Iran. We have emails now where they express to the foreign minister of Iran their allegiance to Iran. And they say, one of them says that it's his job to argue against anyone who says Iran should not have a nuclear weapons stockpile. Those 3 Iranian operatives were helping lead the Biden administration's policy on Iran, and one of them remains a chief of staff in a senior position in the Department of Defense, presumably with her security clearances still in place. It is shocking, and you know what? Senate Foreign Relations Committee hasn't held a single hearing on Iranian spies directing our Iranian policy while we're flooding billions of dollars that is funding Hamas while they're murdering over 1,200 Israelis. It is disgraceful, and any Democrat who wants to stop it needs to stand up and say, cut off the money and get rid of the Iranian spies.
All right, so that's Ted Cruz on his appearance on Life, Liberty, and Levin with Mark Levin, and the numbers have gone up since. This may have been over a week ago, but I know he was on the Sunday show too with Maria Bartiromo, so I'm assuming that it was this past Sunday, but the numbers have gone up. Over 1,400 innocent Jews, again, that were bound, that were burned alive, shot, beheaded, mutilated, raped. I'm going to give you a story. I want to read through some of the story. This was on on Breitbart. This is very hard to hear, so this is going to be pretty disturbing for many of you. And by the way, let me give you just a quick update. It appears that Tom Emmer has been at least nominated for Speaker of the House as we sit. And yesterday I did not record a podcast. You guys may see the podcast room or studio looks a little different. We're still working out lighting. There's a lot of issues that we have to work on, but we are doing that. So in case you're wondering why things look so different, that is why, but still more to come. So just bear with us. I don't know what I literally did with that. I had something printed out that I wanted to share with you guys, and now I literally don't know what I've done with it. It was right in front of my face. Aha, here it is. Okay, so here's the deal. Let me get some of this crap out of the way. So this is part of the problem when you research. You read a lot of stuff. Sometimes you forget where, or you mix stuff up, and that's exactly what I did. All right, so now let me read this. This is from the Daily Wire, and by the way, some journalists were privy to unedited video that the IDF had at some of the gruesome murders that some Israelis endured. Beyond belief. There was a video that one Danish, and I wish I had gotten that video. Actually, that was the other video I got, but no need to play it. I'll just describe it. One Danish journalist recounting what he saw. And he stood in there for, I think he said 30, 35 minutes before he said, I got the picture, can't take this anymore. All right. And he seemed calm, ironically, when he was talking about it. But one of the videos that he described was how Hamas, because Hamas, they were literally videotaping everything with GoPros, literally raping women, beheading children. They were burning people alive. They were taping it. They videotaped themselves holding down an Israeli soldier and literally sawing off his head, as the Danish journalist reported. But one of the ones that got him the most was a father and two of his sons retreated into a safe room as Hamas broke into their home. And as the father retreated in, they threw a grenade in, literally blowing the father up. You could see the father's body explode. His pieces of his body flew all over his kids. His kids come out of the safe room. This sounds like a freak movie, like Cocaine Bear or something, right? His kids come out of the safe room just totally disillusioned, and Hamas offers them water. The terrorists offer them water. The kids run off, disillusioned. Now let me read this. Hamas raped women, grandmothers, children so violently that they broke victims' pelvises. New details have begun to emerge about the barbaric evils that innocent Israeli citizens were forced to experience at the hands of savage Palestinian Islamic terrorists with Hamas during their unprecedented terror attack 2 weeks ago. A woman named Sherry, who did not want to give her last name because she wanted to protect her family, works in the IDF. Rabbinate Corps, and it is her job to clean the victims' bodies, according to the columnist, as best as possible, to prepare them for burial. And here's what she had to say. We wash the bodies and prepare them for burial. We try to bring them dignity in death. She said, I heard stories about Auschwitz as a child growing up in New Jersey, but what I have seen here with my own eyes is worse than the Holocaust, close quote. She goes on to say, what these barbarians did to these people is beyond words. Sherry is now, who is from New Jersey, moved to Israel 20 years ago. She goes on to say, and I quote, there is evidence of mass rape so brutal that they broke their victims' pelvises, women, grandmothers, and children. All right? She said that she never expected to see some of the horrifying scenes that she was exposed to as a result of the Islamic terrorism. People whose heads have been cut off, women standing in their night dresses, woken up and shot, faces blasted off, heads smashed, and their brains spilling out. A baby was cut out of a pregnant woman. I know you guys heard this, and beheaded, and then the mother was beheaded after she was laying there dying and got to watch her baby being beheaded, after it was cut out of her womb, right? Women and children burned to charcoal, bodies murdered with their hands tied behind their backs. She says, my mother and my grandmother are Holocaust survivors. They were the only members of the family to come out of Auschwitz alive after they were taken from their homes in Czechoslovakia. All of her brothers and sisters and uncles and aunts were murdered there. That's what she saw. This is a lady that's cleaning the bodies, trying to give dignity to the bodies. Now, also, you have this story. Now, listen, granted, this is speculation on my part, but I'm going to share it because I think we're all there. A Detroit synagogue president, Samantha Wall, stabbed to death. Samantha Wall, 40, and I know you guys heard about this over the weekend, but I'm going to share it again because I think it's worth sharing. Now, we don't know if this just happened to be a coinky-dink, all right? I suspect that it's not a coinky-dink. I'd like to know who the suspects are because I understand that there are some suspects, all right? So now, this is from Breitbart. Samantha Wall, 40, board president of the Isaac Agree Downtown Synagogue in Detroit, Michigan was murdered Saturday. She was found stabbed to death right outside of her home. In addition to being a Jewish community leader and a prominent Democratic Party activist, Wall was a co-founder of the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Detroit, an interfaith organization. The forum posted on Facebook, quote, "Sam was one of the dear founders of this forum. She was such a sweet, cheerful, thoughtful soul. May her memory be a blessing," close quote. Politically connected Detroit synagogue president was found stabbed to death this morning outside of her home in the city's Lafayette Park neighborhood east of downtown. That was according to the Detroit Free Press. Samantha Wall, again 40, led the Isaac Agree downtown Detroit synagogue and previously worked for Congresswoman Elisa Slotkin and on the re-election campaign of AG or Attorney General Dana Nessel, both Democrats. They were both obviously shocked and saddened to hear about her loss or about her death. They said she was driven by her sincere love of her community, state, and country. Sam truly used her faith and activism to create a better place for everyone. You had Biden that spoke out about it. But she was found stabbed to death right in front of her home. No motive has yet been identified, but Jewish institutions have been under threat ever since the Palestinian terror group Hamas carried out a massive attack in Israel on October 7th, where, again, they murdered over 1,400 people at least. And by the way, they still have hostages, both American and Israeli hostages. Now, let me also share this. I should have shared this earlier in response to Ted Cruz. This is another headline, hat tip from Breitbart. Joe Biden eases oil and gas sanctions to top Iran ally Venezuela, likely funding Hamas. The only reason that attack on Israel, yes, there was obviously, there was intelligence failures. But Hamas would not have been able to pull off that attack were it not for Joe Biden relieving sanctions, allowing these people to profit from money sales that they are, sending. I believe 80% of their money sales are going are being sold to China. This is insane. The Biden administration temporarily lifted oil and gas sanctions on Venezuela on Wednesday as well, allowing the socialist regime of dictator Nicolas Maduro to sell oil in the U.S. and international markets. If you're so worried about climate change, why are you going to allow a dictator to drill for oil when they don't do it as clean as we do in the United States? Lets you know that this is a farce. This is about wealth redistribution. This is about equity. This is about empowering dictators around the world, fascists. The sanctions relief is the largest concession of its kind to Maduro under leftist American President Joe Biden since he took office in 2021. It occurred on the same day that the UN sanctions on Iran's missile program expired, and hours before Iran, a critical ally to Maduro and partner in rehabilitating Venezuela's oil industry, once again threatened to destroy key American ally Israel. Isn't that amazing? And Biden is making sure that they make a buttload of money off of oil. Meanwhile, he ruined the Keystone XL pipeline to starve Americans of oil. Now, having understood all of that and hearing about how brutally women were raped and the bodies, how their pelvises were broken, women, children, grandmothers, and what this lady by the name of Shari, she cleans the bodies and try to provide them dignity before their burials. All of the things that she described. I want you to now hear what Cringe Jean-Pierre, the press secretary of the White House, had to say. I think it was yesterday or the day before when she was asked a question about rising anti-Semitism in the United States of America. Let's roll that game.
His level of concern right now about the potential rise of anti-Semitism in light of everything that's going on in Israel.
So a couple of things. We have not seen any credible threats. I know there's been always questions about credible threats, and so just want to make sure that that's out there. But look, Muslim and those perceived to be Muslim have endured a disproportionate number of hate-fueled attacks, and certainly President Biden understands that many of our Muslim, Arab, Arab Americans and Palestinian American loved ones and neighbors are worried about the hate being directed at their communities, and that is something you heard the president speak to in his address just last Thursday. And so one of the things that the president has done is directed his team, Homeland Security team, to prioritize prevention and disruption of any emerging threats that could harm the Jewish, the Muslim, Arab Americans, or any other communities. And that is something that the president has sought to do and since day one. As you know, the president ran on bringing protecting communities, obviously, but bringing people together, protecting the soul of the nation, and so that is something that the president takes very, very seriously, and. We're going to continue to denounce any sort of hate towards any American here, and so that's what we're going to continue to be steadfast on. Again, he has directed his Homeland Security team to make sure that they're on top of this.
All right, thank you, Cringe. All right, now, guys, let me ask you: Have you heard of any Islamophobia? Have you heard of mistreatment? The mistreatment of Muslims inside of the United States, big stories anywhere. I think the only Islamophobia that I've heard of recently are left-wingers in school boards that are trying to sexualize their children, and they want nothing to do with it inside of the United States. But besides Democrats harassing them and trying to sexualize their children, I haven't heard of any forms of Islamophobia in the United States. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. Of course it does. There's always some type of, nasty idiot, bigot out there. There's no doubt about it. But isn't it amazing that 1,400 innocent Jews were slaughtered again, tied up, burned alive, shot, beheaded, dismembered, mutilated, women raped so violently, women, grandmothers, and children raped so violently that their pelvis were literally broken. And yet, Cringe goes to Islamophobia, Islamophobia. This is very dangerous. I think the White House is really indicating what side they're on. You have Joe Biden, can't run on anything else. I think this guy is determined to be a wartime president. He doesn't want to see the Middle East go up in flames because, in part, it's his fault. He emboldened Iran, he emboldened Russia, he emboldened China. Now there's an axis: China, Russia, and Iran. Iran's proxies are Hamas and Hezbollah. They're worse than ISIS, if you can imagine that. They're worse than ISIS. And these guys were... This is another thing that I forgot to share from that story. A lot of these people that had committed these violent crimes, these savages that committed the violent crimes against Israelis, were also hopped up on cocaine. I forget what they call it, but they were hopped up on cocaine, many of them. Now, here's a great article from the tablet. And guys, it is my argument today that it is time for Jews to leave the left. If this doesn't wake you up, I don't know what will. The left hates you. The left hates you. They completely and utterly hate you. They despise you. There's nothing you can do to change that. You can kiss their butts all you want. You can walk in rallies with them. You can be an anti-Semite even though you're a Jew, and they will still hate you. You can be a progressive. You can be the Jewish voices for whatever that the insurrectionists were just a few days ago or last week that broke into the Capitol with little to no fanfare from left-wing media or from mainstream media. It doesn't matter. They hate you. This was an article from Tablet magazine called Jews of the Left. And it's very well written, but you would think that there will be universal horror from institutions worldwide over the slaughters of the Jews, of the innocent Jews in Israel. But he writes instead that in Sydney, hundreds of demonstrators yelled "gas the Jews." In New York City, you guys may have seen some of the demonstrators, and I retweeted or re-X'd about it, formerly known as Twitter, if you go to my Twitter account. By the way, please follow us on Twitter, Instagram, True Social, Getter, all things social media, The Carl Jackson Show, or at The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. Also, please, Mike Lindell, mypillow.com. He's offering deals right now that are unbelievable. Giza Dream Sheets 50% off. Some things are over 60% off. And we're headed into the holiday season. Bidenomics is really bad on everyone. Inflation sucks. I know there's higher gas and food prices. It just stinks, all right? So you can get a deal at mypillow.com. Use the promo code Carl. Give them a call, 800-858-0263, or go to mypillow.com. Click on the radio podcast square, enter my name, and you can take advantage of all the deals that are available for you. Now, getting back to this issue, so there's been demonstrations in New York City where demonstrators cheered the glorious victory of the resistance, quote unquote, and a swastika even surfaced among the pro-Hamas protesters. And make no doubt about it, since there is no Palestine, these people are pro-Hamas. Also, there's no real, Palestine doesn't exist. Stars of David were spray painted on Jewish homes in Berlin. And even many of your friends may have minimized the atrocities that they saw, despite anguish on your face if you're a Jew. Here's what the Rotor write. It's terrifying to feel the coldness of one's friends. You feel the walls closing in on the floor, the floor dropping from beneath you. Every psychological handhold you can lean on. America is safe, quote. Israel is safe, quote unquote. The Nazis are dead, quote unquote. Turns to sand and you fall down. After the last skirmish between Israel and Hamas that took place a couple of years or so ago, that was nothing compared to 10/7. You had anti-Jewish crimes that spiked inside of the United States. Here's what the writer goes on to say. I'll never forget the sickening mixture of silence and derision from my left-wing peers, he writes. I was accused of trying to distract from Palestinian suffering, of crying anti-Semitism, as they say. This is a guy that wrote about, at that point in time, the spike in anti-Jewish, what he calls hate crimes. I hate calling listen, if you're involved in a crime, it has to do with some level of hate. So I hate calling them hate crimes. Nonetheless, I digress. So he wrote about this a couple of years ago, and he got a lot of hate from people that he didn't expect to get it from, people on the left, and he's a leftist, or he was. If people will dismiss or shrug off beatings and swastikas, they'll also shrug off stabbings and shootings, and eventually they'll shut off pogroms. I didn't know what a pogrom was, but it's basically the organized massacre of a people group, but particularly Jews, like they experienced in the Holocaust. So I look at what Cringe Jean-Pierre said, trying to conflate what Hamas, Islamic terrorists, did to innocent Israelis. Trying to conflate that with some type of Islamophobia that she has no freaking evidence of. And then she just straight up lies. There is way more anti-Semitism in the United States, I would garner, than any other type of hatred that exists. And it's acceptable. You can hate Jews and you can hate white Christian men inside of the United States. Those things are okay. Those things are okay. He said, at least if the perpetrators claim to be freeing Palestine, you can do all the hating you want, he says. I finally wrote an open letter calling on this blind spot. It went viral, but mostly just among other Jews. He then went on to say, I was waking up to the apathy of the same left which claims to care about marginalized groups and claims to, quote, uplift their voices, validate their truths, dismantle the systems that oppress them, and now we are waking up to an even starker truth that millions of people love dead Jews and can't stand living ones, he writes. That many of the sympathetic check-ins we received after the 2018 Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh came not because innocent Jews had been murdered, but because they were murdered by the wrong kind of person, a white dude. I added the white dude, and for the wrong reasons. He argues that Jews are in an abusive relationship with the left-wing progressives and Democrats. He said, you'll cry, you'll tremble, your mind will race, and you'll react one of several ways, but he says it's time basically to stand up. Jews are in an abusive relationship with our progressive friends. It's terrifying to realize this. He goes on to say, these are the reactions, the common reactions that you have when you're in an abusive relationship. One, you go silent. You avoid discussing the situation at all. You pretend the massacre and the mob praising it will spare you if you play spiritually dead. Number two, you rationalize. You blame your own people for the massacre. Quote, you loudly condemn Israel, hoping the forces of hatred will claim only Jews with the audacity to declare their right to live. Number three, you minimize it. You tell yourself that the friends justifying the slaughter of your 1,400 cousins are motivated by misplaced principles that they just don't understand, that they just need to learn a bit more history. These are all survival responses, so they're understandable, but they simply don't work. Here's what does work, and it won't be easy, he writes. Confronting the abuse directly, refusing to be gaslit into thinking that an organization openly founded on the principle of killing Jews somehow doesn't really hate Jews, or that their apologists, some of whom you go to school or work with, aren't tragically complicit in that hatred. The idea of speaking out may terrify you. Your body, your soul will contract, anticipating not only the jeering of your peers, but also the shattering of your image. I'm not like my ultra-Zionist uncle, he writes. I'm not a Republican. I'm a peace lover, a secularist, a progressive liberal, quote unquote. So you should love me. The problem with this, he says, the one thing you indisputably are, though, is a Jew, and it's not up to you. You can reject your Jewishness, and it won't matter. Even after Spain, he writes, forcibly converted many Jews in 1391, it established an inquisition to torment the converts, or what they called the conversos. It's suspected of practicing Judaism secretly. Why did Spain do this? He writes, were the Jews of Spain misbehaving somehow? No. Abuse is not a reflection of the victim's behavior. You hear that, Jewish people? But the abusers. Jews were targeted because in a time of political ferment, kings and preachers needed a scapegoat. Leftists always need a scapegoat for their own sins, for their imperialism, for their colonialism, for their white supremacy that they project onto the rest of us, for the indelible sins etched into their own histories. Will they leave their own settler colonies, he asked? Will they stick out their own necks to be cut by the oppressed, quote unquote? No. They'll outsource that to Jews, in keeping with a tradition based on a Jew who was tortured to death to absolve us all of all sin. A Jew whose death may have been tragic, but was also necessary to redeem the world. Guys, Jews only make up 0.2% of the entire global population. It's virtually impossible for them to stand up and to defend themselves entirely. So they would hope that Christians or Protestants and Catholics and even some Muslims would stand up on their behalf. The American South was built on racism, but it had to be confronted. The evil had to be confronted. This is how he closes. After thousands of years of grinding persecution culminating in the Holocaust, Zionism and Israel present Jewish resistance. That's the way the left sees it. It's Jewish resistance. The belief that you should have a state of your own. The belief that Israel should be a state of his own. The stubborn assertion of our right to live and the legacy of those who refuse to tiptoe, rationalize, or minimize any longer, he writes. You can assert this too. When you do, you'll be surprised by how much of the weight lifts. You'll walk taller. You'll begin seeing the scorn and sanctimoniousness of friends for what it is. You'll attract respect from surprising quarters. You'll learn who your friends are, and in the face of howling vast hatred, you'll feel unexpected peace. Jews, it's time to stand up, and it's time to leave the left. It's time to tell people where you stand, and it's time to tell people you're not going to put up the persecution of your people simply because you're Jewish. All of these Jews that sat in that Capitol building protesting as if the left will love them, if Hamas came, if a Hamas, a soldier of Allah, went into that Capitol building, he would have slit the throats at every single one of those people if he could. He would have raped every single woman inside of that Capitol building if he could. It's a joke. It is a joke. If you believe that you can be a leftist and somehow you're going to be absolved from the hatred and the bigotry of the left, you're not. Why? Because you're a Jew. It's time for Jews to leave the left. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, we need you to subscribe. We need you to share, por favor. That'll help us move up the charts. We certainly appreciate it. We're also on YouTube and Rumble. You can review us there, or I believe rate, however you want to say it. Give us a 5. That'll help us move up the charts. If any of you feel compelled to help out the show and donate, we're trying to make changes to this thing. We're trying to blast off into this bad boy full time. We would certainly appreciate it. You can go to the special thanks, which you find on YouTube. Hopefully in the near future, I hope to be coming to you doing some live shows. So you have that to look forward to. We're going to continue to work on the studio. I know things still look a little crazy, but we're going to get it down. Until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good. God bless.